Okay. All right. I'm going to get started. I get the chat box up in case anyone has any questions. It starts with economy, income, and expenditures. And I think what you got to really take away from there is total income equals total expenditures. For every dollar spent, there's a dollar earned. All right. So total income equal total expenditures. Now, on the total income side, it's the rent, it's wages, and profit. So rent plus wages plus profit. We're going to do most of us on the expenditure side, which is consumption, investment, government spending, net exports. Consumption, investment, government spending, net exports. Remembering net exports are exports minus imports. There's two other things there that I think are worth noted. One is depreciation. Depreciation is the decreased value of older equipment. So, I mean, I think the one you can maybe relate to the best is if you buy a car for 25,000, the next year it might be worth 18,000. It depreciated 7,000. Okay, just meaning that the car becomes less. And a lot of that time, equipment, computers, and stuff depreciate in companies. The second thing that just gets thrown in there somewhere is what he calls seasonal adjustments. So the quarterly GDP usually goes up in the last quarter because you have Christmas shopping and stuff like that. So there's a lot of consumption. So that's like a seasonal adjustment. It's going to go up during that time. So seasonal adjustment is when GDP typically increases, like at Christmas or some seasonal event. He then says GDP is the market value, and it's the market value of final goods and services. Final goods and services. So that is like when the consumer is the end user. Okay. Of all items produced and sold legally. So you got to remember produced and sold legally. The goods and services are a final product. So GDP is the market value of final goods and services, items produced and sold legally, and the goods and services of a final product. Now, in the produced part, I put who purchases these goods and services? Households, firms, and government, right? Households usually under consumption, firms usually under investment, and government usually under government spending. And then within a border, usually in a 1-year period. So if I was looking at that whole front page where GDP is the market value of final goods and services, items produced and sold legally, final product, who produces and purchases? Households, usually under consumption, firms, usually under investment, and government purchases. Excuse me, within a border, usually 1 year. All right. Then he broke down the expenditure part, right? So consumption is spending by a household of goods and services. Spending by a household of goods and services. Let's try to get a color pen. All right. But now, the one thing again is if Evan buys a Toyota 40,000, this could be invisible ink. Oh, great. All right. Let's see. What could we get here? Could we get a normal pen here? All right. So here, maybe this will work. Yeah. All right. So Evan buys that Toyota, and I did this in class. I just want to go over it again. 40,000. All right. The Toyota is made in Japan, so it shouldn't be part of the GDP. However, he's going to buy it. So consumption is going to be plus 40,000. The car dealer in the United States is going to report a $40,000 car deal. So consumption is going to go up 40,000. Okay. Net exports, however, I'm just going to put NE, save the net exports, however, are going to go down 40,000. You're going to, wash out with no change to GDP. Okay. So they could give you a problem where someone is buying something from a foreign country for 40,000, and they could say, what impact does it? Well, GDP will go up 40, net exports will go down 40, and the consumption will go up 40, net exports will go down 40, and GDP will be unaffected. All right. I just wanted to show you that. Then there's investment. Investment is three categories: capital goods, which are things that help the company. It could be machines, it could be staples, it can be computers, things that help the company. Inventory, which I'm going to go over in a second, and new houses. Now, I did this in lecture, but I want to go over it again. So Ford has a $20,000 car that they don't sell in 2022. So what they do in 2022 is put that $20,000 car unsold in what they call inventory, which goes under the investment part of GDP. So that's inventory. Try to be easy to go into investment. So the GDP 2022 is up 20,000, right? Because 20,000 went into inventory. Now, the car sold in 2023 for 20,000. So what happens? Consumption is plus 20, right? The car sold at the car dealer for 20,000. And investment is down 20. Inventory is down 20. And why? Because that car is out of inventory. It's no longer there. So now it's minus 20. So let's look for a second what happened. In 2022, GDP increased 20,000 because we had 20,000 added inventory, which goes under the investment category. In 2023, the consumption added 20, but the inventory minus 20. So there was no effect in 2023 by the sale of the car. It only affected GDP in 2022. All right. So that is investment, which is made up of this investment in machines and equipment, inventory, and new homes. The third thing is government spending, which is spending on goods and services. Okay. However, no transfer payments. What do I mean by a transfer payment? Social Security, unemployment, welfare. These are things where the government is paying people and not getting a goods and service. A subsidy would be a transfer payment. All right. So examples of government purchase: paying military, building roads, building schools. Okay. Dev, I'll be back to you in a second. And then net exports, which is exports minus inventory, minus imports. And remember, net exports, because they give you like a list of things and they'll put exports in, it's exports minus imports. Why did inventory go down? Because in 2022, you are into inventory, so So plus 20,000. You sold it in 2023, you took it out of inventory, and that made it a minus 20,000. Does that make sense, Steph? Okay. Okay. And then he has real versus nominal. So nominal is current year price times current year output. Current year price times current year output. If nominal GDP changes, there could be a change in prices or a change in production. So if nominal GDP goes up, prices could have went up and production could have stayed the same. Prices could have stayed the same and production could have went up, or they both could have went up. All right. So nominal GDP, you cannot tell about production. Real GDP is current output times base year price. Current output times base year price. If real GDP goes up, production has to go up because everyone's timesing it by the same price. So real GDP goes up, production has to go up. For both nominal and real GDP, remember, the nominal GDP per capita or the real GDP per capita is just nominal or real GDP divided by population. I thought we got good practice on the GDP deflator today, and that's nominal over real times 100. I mean, is GDP a great measure of economic growth? I think real GDP is a good measure of economic growth. Okay. And then the last thing I want to put in, and like you could just put it at the bottom, is GNP, gross national product. GNP equals GDP plus what US citizens made abroad. So GNP equals GDP plus what US citizens made abroad minus what foreigners made in the United States. So GNP is GDP plus what US citizens made abroad minus what foreigners made in the US. So when you look at GNP, it's really what US citizens made and US companies made, both in our country and abroad. All right, I am gonna get the practice quiz up here, and I'll take questions on anything. Let me get the chat up. Anything I went over or anything on the practice quiz you would like to discuss. If it's the practice quiz, just put a number down and I'll go over it. Otherwise, you could type in a question if it was something I just talked about. Oh, yeah, Lucas, anytime, and I'll get 11 in a second, Max. Lucas, anytime there's inflation, and there's inflation is not on this quiz because it's just GDP, and they might ask you to figure out the GDP deflator, which does say inflation, but I don't think they'd ask you to compare. You would go year 2 minus year 1 over year 1. And that tells you how much inflation either increased or decreased. Is that what you wanted, Lucas?
Mr. Bressler?
Okay, number 9. Okay. Let me look at 9 and then we'll do 11. scroll down. Okay, so the inflation rate is the percent. So what it's really saying is the inflation rate is the percentage change in price level from one period to another, which would be the percentage change in year two from year one. Okay, that it's like putting the formula into words. Okay, all right, Max, you asked for 11. Oh, all right. So a lot of times, like they would say, productivity measures well-being and GDP measures productivity. But why isn't it perfect? Because part of being being like a good standard of living and well-being and happiness would be like having volunteer work. Also, if one person is getting all the money in the GDP, I mean, a lot of people are then not happy. So GDP does not address distribution of income. It doesn't address like the quality of the environment. And like, if everyone's working 90 hours a week, I don't know, that is, so A, B, C, and D are all weaknesses of the GDP for measuring happiness. Okay. All right. Spiro, you're saying number 3. Okay. How does the U.S. gross domestic product do? All right. So for number 3, how does the U.S. gross domestic product differ from the U.S. gross net? So the GNP, like I believe the answer for that would be B, right? The GNP equals GDP plus income earned by citizens abroad minus income. And that was the last thing I said, Spiro. I talked about the GNP in the notes, and B is really the definition of GNP. It's GDP plus income earned by U.S. citizens abroad minus income foreign citizens earned in the United States. So GNP really is how much does U.S. citizens produce, both in the United States and internationally. Does that make sense, Spiro?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can we do 8?
Yes. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So if I'm doing 8, and I would recommend like you fool around with this chart and be able to. So the nominal GDP, what 8? So, all right. So the base year is 2005, right? So if the base year is in 2005, I know nominal and real have to be equal, because they're going to be the same. Like nominals could be 4 times 90, it's 150, 50 times 150, and real is going to be the same. So I know that. I'm going to find nominals equal to real GDP, and the GDP deflator is equal to 1. Well, I know 2005 is the base year, so the GDP deflator has to equal 100. So nominal GDP was equal to real GDP, and so it's D as in Plugwood. But I'd really be able to figure out what like nominal GDP is in 2007, and what would the real be. So the nominal GDP in 2007 would be $5 times 120, which is 600, 250 times 2, which is 500. So that'd be 1100. What would the real be? Okay. So the real would be 120 times 4, if you're using 2005 prices, and 200 times $1.50. Oh, you're doing pretzels and books. It's like saying to you, there's two things in the economy, pretzels and books. You add them, yes. Okay. Any other questions anyone has? Yeah, Jackson, an example, examples of transfer payments. I think if I say all these, I'll probably cover anyway. Social Security, because you're giving old people money, but they're not giving you a good or a service. Unemployment, because you're giving unemployed people money, they're not giving you a good or a service. Welfare, because you're giving people money, they're not giving you a good or service. And subsidies, like say, you're subsidizing something, the government's giving you money as an incentive to make things, but they're not getting anything back from it. So I would say Social Security, welfare, unemployment subsidies. Is that what you needed? Number 2. Oh, I don't think you really need to know retained earnings, but it's corporations have earned but have not paid out to their owners. So it'd be D. I think that was in the old textbook, but it's not in the new textbook. The GNP, you do need to know what I went over with how you take imports into you need to know, and you definitely need to know inventories. What is part of government government purchases, Deb, would be they build roads, they build schools, they build traffic lights, they pay military lieutenants, they buy tanks. Anything government spends on that they get like a good or a service for. Was that okay, F? Did that make sense to you? Okay, any other questions? Okay, if that's it, I will see you guys tomorrow. I'll be around.